Welcome to the Android Guys in Brief podcast, the podcast that brings you all of the tech news you need to know in just 15 minutes. Today is May the 11th, Friday, 2018. Today on the podcast we have me, Matt Adams. I'm an editor here at Android Guys. We have another editor, Andrew Myrick. And
What's up?
the man that makes it all possible, Scott Webster, editor-in-chief.
Hey, I'm important.
Yeah, that you are.
I make it all possible.
Yeah. So, this is our first episode of the Android Guys in Brief podcast, and like we said, we're going to bring you all of the news you need to know in about 15 minutes. This is a bit of a special episode, though, because it is Google I/O week. If you didn't know, Google I/O, Google's developer conference has been going on all week, and boy, have there been a ton of stories coming out of there. But we're going to start with a story that actually is not related to Google I/O, and that is that Google is going to release up to 3 Pixel-branded watches this year. Evan Blass, who many people know as EV-Leaks or EV-Leaks, tweeted out that besides the Pixel 3 and Pixel 3 XL and some new Pixel Buds, Google is going to introduce a Pixel-branded watch later this year. That was followed up by Roland Quant, who is another pretty famous writer and leaker, saying that there's actually going to be 3 watches coming. Google has not released its own watch as of yet, and other companies use their OS, Wear OS. So, guys, what do you think about Google reaching out just from phones and accessories now into watches too?
I think it's an interesting move. I think it makes a lot of sense. It feels to me like something that should have been happening, a year or two back, with Android OS, moving into Android Wear. That seemed like something that Google would want to kind of take the reins on and say, hey, when it comes to phones, we've had the Nexus line, the Pixel line. This is how we envision, the hardware experience, or at least the platform. Doing it for a watch, I mean, it makes sense to me. I don't know how you... I mean, watches are watches, so the hardware aspect of that, it's going to be, are they any good at it? Does it look like something that Google would put out? I mean, they've done a good job with, having like a kind of a uniform aesthetic across like the Google Home, the Pixel Book, the Pixel. They all kind of look like Google products, so I would assume the watches look that way. But I feel like it should have happened, maybe a year or two back. So I'm kind of happy to see. Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's long overdue. I mean, we've been hoping for a Pixel branded watch or a Nexus branded watch for a while now. At least I have, just to see what Google would be able to do with their own operating system. I'm surprised that Qualcomm's actually making a new chipset. I think that's pretty important for it. Because the Snapdragon 2100 chipset has been around for like 2 or 3 years at this point, and all Wear OS devices still use it, but it's like super outdated, slow, depending upon the other chip or the other hardware inside.
Mm-hmm.
So them partnering up and saying, hey, we're going to make another Snapdragon Wear processor, I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, you guys saying that it's been a couple years that we've been waiting on this. I wonder if they were waiting on a new chipset, because like you said, everybody uses the same thing, and it's, I mean, the processing power behind that is like 4 or 5 years old, and the chip came out like 2 or 3 years ago. So it's old tech.
Right.
Question: is there any indication that they're going to rely on a hardware partner for this, like HTC for the Pixel 2, or anybody, LG, Huawei that they've worked with? Is there any chatter about that yet?
I wrote the post. I haven't seen anything about them partnering with somebody specifically. I know that there will be other smartwatch makers like Fossil and all that will be using the Wear 3100 also, but specifically for the Pixel, I haven't seen anything. I don't know if you have, Matt.
No, I haven't either, but you would have to assume that they're going to have to team up with somebody, because all of they don't make their own hardware. they bought HTC's ARM, and I suppose that they could use that hardware ARM to create these. But from what we know about how long it takes to put hardware together, you'd think that these have been in the works longer than they've owned that HTC hardware arm. So I would assume that they're going to end up partnering with somebody, but I don't know who yet.
Right. So in looking at the processor here, the Snapdragon Wear 3100, looks like specs call for quad-core processor. Not sure the clock rate yet. I don't think anybody has that. Other specs include GPS, LTE, voice over LTE, and Bluetooth codec aptX. So it's going to be fun to watch whether Android Wear or Wear OS kind of takes off again. It kind of feels like a few false starts with big intentions. I know when Android Wear came out and then it was 2.0, it was kind of like each iteration's like, oh, here we go, they're going to get it right, or they're going to, this is going to really kind of kick it off. And for all practical purposes, a Fitbit, Samsung Watch, some of those, they do everything I really need. Android Wear is nice, and Wear OS I would assume is going to be just as, if not better. But it's kind of hard for me to get excited for a watch, especially every cycle. So the stuff that I have seems to be just fine for me, and I don't know that the next version is going to be super appealing. Do you guys have experience with Android Wear, and what are your thoughts on a future having to replace that or wanting to replace that?
Yeah, my experience, I've had a couple watches in the past, and I think it says a lot about where Wear OS and where those type of watches are, that I never truly fell in love with a smartwatch until I started using an Apple Watch, because it's so much better than anything that the Android side of things puts out right now. Andrew, I don't know how you feel, but just I there's nothing that's truly compelling to me on the Android side right now.
No, if I were to pick up an Android Wear watch today, like if I were to buy one myself, I would go on Swap or something and pick up the original Moto or the second gen Moto 360.
Right, and how long has that been out?
I think a lot of it's been years.
Right,
hardware wise, we haven't seen anything major and quote unquote innovative in quite some time, and I think that is part of the problem for the most part. But with Google rebranding Android Wear to Wear OS, I mean, obviously they have something planned. I know that there were some sessions at I/O based on Wear OS, so it'll be interesting to see where they think its wearable division is actually going in the next couple of years. Because I don't think they're just gonna give this one last shot and then quit on it. But who knows? It wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility.
Yep.
So as to when we can expect these, we're probably not going to see them until October-ish. If the last couple of years are any indication, probably October. But between now and then, the rumors are probably going to fly.
Yeah.
Do we have any code names that we can keep an eye on? Any type of rumored stuff that if you're looking for them online?
Yeah, so sticking with Google always goes with names of fish for code names for their devices. So far we have Ling, Triton, and Sardine to go off of. So good old Google with their fish names.
I can't tell what the hierarchy is on those.
Yeah.
Where do they stack up, and which one's the big bad boy? Cool. So we'll keep an eye out for that stuff here over the next couple of weeks and months.
All right. So the as Andrew said, there was a couple of things about Wear OS during I/O. So let's get into some I/O news. The first piece of news that we're going to talk about is probably the most recent to come out of Google I/O, and that's Google is going to start requiring Android device manufacturers to roll out regular security patches. And this isn't necessarily software updates, but this is the monthly security patches that Google releases for the Android operating system. The head of Android's platform security stated that they're currently working to build in security patching into the agreements that the OEMs have to sign to actually use Android. And he said this will lead to a massive increase in the number of devices and users receiving regular security patches. I'm just wondering, do you guys think that this is actually a big deal, getting the security patches? Because we always complain about how slow Android updates are, but no one ever really talks about security patches that much.
So this doesn't feel like something that should be new. It kind of feels like we maybe have heard something like this before, or similar in terms of, you know, requiring software updates to Android for at least 18 months or 2 years, or promising to support their own devices. And, you know, I know they've been pushing out their own security updates monthly, but I don't know. You know, when I talk about devices, when I review things like something from Blue, you know, some of their phones tend to be a little bit, I don't say behind, but they tend to be like one release behind what a lot of the phones are. So if, you know, 8.0 stuff is out right now, sometimes you find a phone that sneaks out with 7.0 or 7.1. So when I address that, my concern is, hey, you know, visually and performance wise, they're not huge differences between them. Some things you're going to look at and go, oh yeah, that's definitely, you know, Oreo, or that's a feature that you got in 6.0 or whatever. But addressing security, you know, sometimes you'll see these vulnerabilities in these headlines of securities and leaks and things that are, you know, leave and open these vulnerabilities. So that is something to be concerned with. I think if you're doing it maybe quarterly, or at least hitting these major, you know, if there's a major exploit, then of course you're going to want to get something out there. But I don't know. It kind of feels like, you know, I if this isn't new news, it feels like something that should have kind of been like, hey, this is part of using Android. You're going to have to, you know, if we push out a software update, you should be pushing it out as well.
Yeah, I'm not super excited about this because, you know, what if what if Motorola decides that no, we're not going to do this? You know, is Google going to pull like the ability for Motorola to use the software anymore? I doubt it. But what this could mean is, reading our notes here, it says this a lot of this has to do with Project Treble. So I'm hoping this opens the door for OEMs to stop taking 6 to 8 months to over a year to give us new versions of Android. And this might just be opening the door for that. I mean, I could be completely wrong, but that's what I'm hoping for. As far as the regular security patches, as long as they're semi-updated and it makes it easier for OEMs to release a patch when a big security issue arises, that's great and fine and dandy. But that's not really my issue when it comes to updates.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I'm not super concerned about security unless there's a huge exploit going on. Um, and, you know, for me, that should be an easy patch to push if there's something massive going on. I agree with you, Andrew. When you start talking about Treble, you know, the big thing with Treble was that it was supposed to make updates faster. And if we can get newer, secure versions of OS updates quicker, that's what excites me.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you guys this: do you think carriers should be allowed to impede uh, these updates? Do you think they should have to pass through carriers? I mean, we could spend a long time talking about that, but at a surface, do you think it has to be vetted by, say, Verizon before rolling it out? If Samsung says, no, we've had this ready to go since April, why is it not getting out until July? Uh, should carriers have that kind of, you know, approval process?
Nope.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Definitely not for security updates. Now, I understand if they want to pass, you know, major OS updates because they they pay these cell phone companies to put their apps on there, and they have to make sure that it works on their service. I get that. I still think it sucks and they take way too long, but I get that.
Mm-hmm.
Security, absolutely not.
Yeah. See, I mean, I guess their side of it's going to be, hey, we don't want something to be pushed out that breaks our services or does something that we're not quite ready for. You think back years ago when Google made it possible to do mobile hotspot right in the platform. This is something that was like revolutionary, like the idea of taking your phone and turning it into a hotspot before carriers were ready to kind of say, wait a second, that's cool with us. Um, you know, I don't know what kind of changes can be done. Security wise, nothing really that's going to break or do anything to a carrier. But if it comes to um, user features and experience, that's more of the platform side. I can see them kind of saying, give us some time to look through this and figure out if it, you know, breaks something that we're doing or conflicts with something, or we need to stop what we were working on because now it's built into the platform. I get all that, but when it comes to security, I think if Google pushes something out and the OEMs grab it and they've vetted it, I say day one, put it out.
Absolutely. The world moves so fast now, and information is shared so quickly that if someone gains access to your phone or many phones, that information is immediately being gathered. You got to work to mitigate that really, really quickly.
Right. So, uh, talking about platform and software updates, let's go to the next topic. This is an interesting one.
Yeah, one of the big parts of the keynote during the first day of I/O was the new features for Android P. I just want you guys to tell me what you saw, what you think is the most important, and what blew your mind.
In terms of Android P,
Yeah. What did you see for Android P that makes you excited for the future of Android?
so I think we were chatting kind of internally with in Slack, and a couple of things kind of piqued my interest. But I like the idea of the dashboard. I mean, we've been able to see what apps are using our battery and what percent and how often we're using. Like what amount of our battery is being used by an app.
Mm-hmm.
We've been able to do that with data to see what apps are using data. Now it makes sense with the Android dashboard to see what actual apps we're spending our time with in terms of time. So not just battery draw, but looking at it and going, wow, although this is a really efficient app and doesn't use much battery, I spend a lot of time on, Reddit or checking my crypto in an app just to update that so many times a day. How often am I actually unlocking my phone? How often am I getting notifications, responding? To me, that's interesting to have that information because if I'm cognizant of that, then maybe I can make some changes and say, you know what, it's on me to put my phone away a little bit more. I can very easily go to dinner, put my phone away. We sit down at the table as a family. Nobody messes with their phone. I can go to a movie and not even think about getting my phone out. But when it comes to just throughout the day, if it's a boredom thing, man, I'm picking my phone up all the time. So dashboard was interesting. And then for me, the other one is the navigation, getting away from the three buttons, whether they're hard buttons or soft buttons, but getting into more of like a gesture, like swiping off of one button. That's interesting. Andrew, you?
Oh, it's definitely the gesture navigation. I also use an iPhone X in addition to the Galaxy S9 Plus, and I absolutely love gestures. And I'm so excited that they're coming to Android. I know OnePlus did this earlier this year already. Like they, in one of their Oxygen OS open betas, they brought gesture support, but to see it come to stock Android, I'm so excited, and it's making me want to get a Pixel 2 like right now,
Have
just
you
so I
had
can play with it.
Have you had a chance to play with it, either of you?
Not yet, no.
No, I haven't either, but like Andrew, I was on Swappa checking the prices for used Pixel 2 XLs as soon as they started showing that, because that looks amazing.
So I have a Pixel 2. and I installed the beta to play with it. And by default, it's not on there. You have to go into the settings under gestures and turn it on, uh, because by default you're going to get your standard 3. But it is fun. It's interesting and kind of like unlearning something that you've used for the better part of a decade now, and looking for the multifunction or the recent apps button, the back button. It's kind of interesting. It does have a little bit of a learning curve, at least for me.
Do you think it's going to be easy for people to adapt to that when they upgrade to Android P?
I think it can, if they have like those overlays that kind of walk you through using it. Um, if you're brand new out of the box, do they assume that every person's never had a phone and let's walk you through Android? I don't think they really do that. But if they assume, hey, you've probably used our phone because 80% of the world's been using Android, so here's what's a little different from what you might be familiar with. Maybe just a couple of things to say, tap here, swipe up, do this. It's not going to be hard to figure that out. But if you just hand it to somebody, like I handed it to my wife and said, hey, check it out. Here's the way the menu works. What do I do? How do, and my son, I put him into an app and he's like, okay, so how do I go back? I'm like, oh no, the button's there for back. But showing them being able to swipe through, it moves quick. Swiping up to get into your apps, it does have like this, it feels a little bit redundant if I'm trying to get into my app drawer. To just swipe up once, it takes you, presents the 5 apps that you're most likely to be opening at that time or want to use. But if you do a quick, like a full swipe all the way up, you can go right into it. It kind of doesn't have the 2-step process that I thought it did. You can kind of do like this long drag to get into it.
Yeah, that was kind of nice. That was the one thing I didn't like, was them taking away the app drawer from just a swipe up. I'm so used to that like learned thing now, and it's so easy, and I use that so much because I'm a one screen guy. I have a calendar widget on my second screen, but that's it. So I'm all the time in my app drawer, opening up apps, and now it's a second swipe or a longer swipe, and I know that doesn't seem like a big deal when you say it, but for daily use, I have a feeling that's going to annoy the crap out of me.
Yeah, it kind of took a second for me to realize, wait, I can actually, I'm not swiping from, with the Pixel, they have the search bar at the bottom, so you kind of put your finger there and swipe up. That gives you those apps in the search, but then you swipe again to get to your menu or your full set of apps. But if you're actually doing it like along from the home screen, you can drag that all in one motion to get into it. So it, after 2 to 3 days, I've kind of felt like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. So it is a nice change. It's definitely, the animations are cool. They're little subtle things. The UI has some refinements that, notifications, they just look a little bit cleaner. They've kind of added a little bit more color back into it. When you go into like your settings, it's not quite as, two-tone. It's got a little bit of life to it, so I like it.
So a couple of the things that they showed off were adaptive battery, and that is supposedly going to look at the apps that you use and push some that you don't use as much to low power cores. Then we have stuff like adaptive brightness, which it more adjusts to how you like the brightness, and not so much how much light is in the room. So they're relying a lot on like machine learning and AI. And my question is, do you guys think that those are features that people are actually going to care about, and are they actually going to make that big of a difference? Are you actually going to notice that they're there?
It's tough. Adaptive battery, probably just going to be a case of, every platform release major update is
weird every year.
Battery.
Every year.
Battery's better, and then we're getting, better technology in the batteries. We're getting higher capacity, quick charging, wireless. So that's improved. So it might be minimal. but it is nice to see them kind of address that or like make a concerted effort to address it. Adaptive brightness kind of sounded like, wait a second, this is my phone already does that. It looks at the light around that, but then when I realized, well, maybe I like it brighter than what the phone wants to set it at, and kind of overrides the ambient light sensor. That is nice to me. So if I'm in my room at night reading, sometimes I like to keep it at a certain brightness, which is actually brighter than what it recommends. So if it learns me and starts to set things and kind of give me this like, I don't have to think about it, that's when I know it's really working. But if I find myself reaching and kind of adjusting and doing things, then that's where I know, hey, it's not quite working the way they at least sold it to me.
All right, well, let's move on to our last topic, and this is the one everyone's talking about. Google
Speaking of
Duplex.
machine learning.
Yeah, right, exactly. And we'll have a video of this in our show notes on AndroidGuys.com. But Google showed off a demo of what they're calling Duplex, and the technology behind pretty much assistant turning into a real assistant, being able to have real conversations with people over the phone. Andrew, do you think that this is the start of just us not talking to anyone anymore?
I thought you were going to say Judgment Day.
I hope so. That too. Because all right, so it was really cool that it actually like called, what was it, a barbershop or a hair salon in a restaurant or whatever. But what freaked me out was the pauses that it made, like the like those realistic tendencies put into a computer, like a bot. It's like, okay, we're not gonna die, right? They're not just gonna take over, right?
Well, think
I
about
mean, it was really cool, and I could see huh?
No, go ahead.
It just like kind of freaked me out a little bit. It's really, really cool, and I could see like the uses, especially for like accessibility and stuff like that. But it still freaked me out.
So it knows everything. Like if it calls and says I need to set an appointment, it knows the name, it knows the time, how many people, if it's a reservation, it knows all that stuff immediately. The fact that they build in these deliberate pauses to make it, not only like say but the fact that it kind of puts these spaces and lets it breathe a little and makes it feel real is mind-blowing. It's been a long time since I've watched a demo on a stage of some kind of tech or some kind of product where I was just like, whoa, that's really cool, and also potentially very scary. I'm not afraid of it doing anything, but I think there are people who they look at it, if you look at some of the feedback on Twitter, there are people who are just talking about how it's not right that they do that. I know Google has come out since, I think in the last day or so, and said that they're taking feedback, and that when it ultimately rolls out, it'll be some kind of a disclaimer that might say something. Perhaps it says, "Hi, I'm a Google Assistant calling on behalf of somebody. I'd like to set an appointment." If it does that, I think that's amazing. I think that's really cool. I think that people could very well get used to that. I think if I ran a business and I got a call that says, "Hi, I'm a Google Assistant calling for Andrew," I think it would be cool, because then I know what to expect from that conversation. But if it's without that, it's crazy. I imagine two of these things talking to each other and having some kind of crazy conversation.
Yeah.
Oh man, that would be hilarious. It'd be like the Home versus Echo or whatever it was a few years back.
You know that there's going to be videos on YouTube in 10 years of the 10 craziest assistant to assistant calls or whatever. Like, that's going to be a thing.
Yeah. And I like it. You know, whenever something like this happens, whenever tech gets that much easier for people, you know, I tend to litmus test it with my wife. Hey, check this out. And she's always like, this reminds me of Wally. We're gonna all be sitting around in these chairs getting attacked, not going to do anything. I'm like, can you at least concede that it's awesome? She's like, it's cool. It's okay. I'm like, no, it's conceivably it's amazing. Like you said, Andrew, having it for accessibility, people who can't do things, like if they just, you know, uh, they can't type out on the keyboard or use their actual voice, but if they're actually doing like, you know, Morse code, or they're doing something where they have to actually, you know, tell it manually to do things, for it to call somebody and set these appointments or to just have conversations on behalf of somebody, I think that's really, really cool. How soon are we going to have
Yeah,
this? Did they say? I mean, it's coming months, was it? Or just in the works?
It says it's going to be coming to a small number of users later this summer. So, whatever that means.
Sounds like a beta test group.
Google did say that they'll be putting a disclaimer whenever like Assistant makes a call. So that, I mean, I guess that's a little easy. That makes it a little easier, because like during the keynote announcement, they didn't say that. They just said this is coming.
That's a big thing to leave out.
But one thing, yeah. But the cool thing is like Google does things every couple of years to like polarize the public, and my non-techie friends are like sharing the announcement post on Facebook and Twitter and stuff, and just like commenting about it. And I think that this is one of those things that people, whether you are like us and super nerdy and geeky or whatever you want to call it, and those who aren't, are like kind of like Google gets everybody together, and this is how they do it. Like showing off duplex is how they do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just shows off like how Google I/O may be only once a year, but it still shows us how much firepower they really have behind the scenes.
Right. Well, and that's not to say anything of what they talked about with, you know, Google Assistant in general, with the new voices and how natural they sound, the stuff that they have in photos, with being able to edit or recommend sharing for people if they know who's in the photo. Google Maps being able to suggest, you know, hey, we want to go out to dinner. Let's, you know, collectively figure out where we're going to go without having to text back and forth and tell people, no, I don't want to do this, or what about that? Like being able to put these lists together, like all that stuff is really awesome. And it's all centered around machine learning. So I think that's like a huge theme this year. But they've done a really good job of like touching everything they do has some machine learning. Like Google with the Gmail, with being able to almost type out an entire email based off of what it thinks you're going to say, with like shortcuts. I mean, it's really cool.
Oh yeah, definitely. All you have to do it like that. I haven't gotten that yet, but I can't wait for that to come. Like, it's starting to roll out now. But like being able to automatically type out emails is going to save so much time.
Addresses, a lot of stuff that we're doing, like canned responses, like I'm copying and pasting. Like if I can alleviate that, that just saves me a few minutes here. But if I do that 4 or 5 times a day, times, you know, 300 times a year, that's a lot of productivity and that I get back, a lot of time.
And just think about how excited everybody was when we started getting smart replies. And I mean, smart replies are still like kind of beta-ishy and still rolling out to a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And now we're getting technology that like writes entire emails and freaking calls the hair salon to set up a hair appointment for you and sounds like a real person. I mean, that is a crazy advance in such a short amount of time. And you know, I'm sure duplex isn't ready for prime time yet. That's why it's not rolled out. And you know, even in the demos you could hear a couple little issues, but I mean, that is such a quick advance in the technology that for me is what is the mind-blowing thing, is how fast it's happening.
Right. Makes you wonder what they aren't quite ready to show yet.
Right, yeah, exactly. What got cut from Google I/O this year that was like, that puts duplex to shame?
Right. Well, like you said, smart replies. That with Google's inbox, that was one of the cool things. Was like, hey, I don't have to worry about sending off a quick "sounds good, thanks" or "yes, I'm in," that type of thing. But having that in Gmail now, and I watch those just to see what it suggests for me in my
Mm.
responses, and I'm getting to the point where I'm wanting to just tap that and then maybe add one or two small things to it, but almost universally they're kind of hitting that on the nose. Like, here's the responses we think this merits. But when you look at that, then the conspiracy theorists on the other side of the coin is, man, they know everything about you. They know everything that's in your email, and why should they have access to read all that? And what are they doing with that data? And we could talk probably another hour on
Yeah.
the merits of that, but uh, I'm okay with it. I really am, and I think if there's opt-in and opt-out, and they're transparent about things, I say bring on these things that make my life easier.
Yeah, I mean, they have to be transparent. I mean, it's a must.
Yep.
If they're not, then that's a different road that we don't need to go down.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's gonna do it for today. Our episode today was a little bit longer than we would normally expect, just because of all the IO announcements. But we will post our episodes on the front page of our website, AndroidGuys.com, and wherever fine podcasts can be found, like iTunes and Google Play Music. So since this is a Friday episode, we're going to remind you, check in over the weekend. We post our Saturday savings posts where we tell you where you can save the most money on tech products. And we also have just started our weekend recommender, where we talk about some of the cooler products that we're taking a look at. So be sure to keep your guys' eyes open for that. For Andrew Myrick and Scott Webster, this is Matt Adams signing off.